Today, we are going to wrap up Rachel Carson, Pioneer of Ecology. We are going to read Chapter 8, The Final Battle. Rachel kept her new book, Silent Spring, a secret. The book had to be as strong as it could be before its enemies found out about it. Rachel double-checked every fact. She asked other scientists to read part of the book to be sure she was right. She asked them to help her keep the secret of Silent Spring. The pesticide problem was worse than anyone knew. In the 1950s, most of the people never heard of pollution. They believed that the government would protect them from any danger. Rachel was learning that this was not true. Scientists had made dreadful poisons that could end all life on Earth. If people kept using these chemicals, springtime might someday come silently, with no birds left to sing and no people left to hear them. The more Rachel learned, the more determined she was to write the book. It wasn't easy for her. A neighbor remembered that Rachel would do all the household chores first and try to take care of the family, and then would try and find time to work. Twice a year, everything was moved to Maine or back to Maryland. It was no wonder that work on Silent Spring went slowly. Rachel stopped writing in 1959. Her mother, very old and very ill, died. Mrs. Carson had helped shape nearly all of her daughter's life. She had taught Rachel to love nature and encouraged her to be a writer. She had helped with every decision Rachel had ever made, except for a few years when Rachel was at college and during the war years when they always lived together. Now, for the first time, Rachel was alone. It was a terrible shock. A few weeks later, Oxford University Press told Rachel that they wanted to publish The Sea Around Us again. They asked if she would add some of the new facts scientists had learned in the 10 years since her first book had been published. Rachel went back to writing, working through one illness after another. First it was the flu, then a painful stomach ulcer. Arthritis and infection in her knees kept her from walking for months. An eye infection made her blind for a few weeks. So many bad things were happening that Rachel said she felt like she was under an evil spell that would never let her finish Silent Spring. Worst of all, she learned that she had cancer and that it was going to kill her. Another person might have given up writing, but Rachel said, knowing the facts as I did, I could not rest. Now, she studied about cancer as well as pesticides. The facts went into new chapters about how poisons in the environment cause cancer. Did she have time to finish Silent Spring? She had to. All life on Earth was in danger, not just her own. Early in 1962, Silent Spring was done. After 4 years, the article no one would publish had grown into an enormous book, beautifully written and full of complicated scientific ideas. But would it work as a warning? Would it make people want to change things? Marie sent Silent Spring to Rachel's publisher, The New Yorker magazine. Rachel wanted to hear what the editors thought. Within a week, she got a late-night phone call. Mr. William Shawn, editor of The New Yorker, had just finished reading her work. He couldn't wait until the next morning to tell her how wonderful it was. He was horrified by the things he had learned from Silent Spring. How could this have happened? What could be done about it? That was exactly what Rachel wanted to hear. She knew now that Silent Spring would work. Rachel picked up her cat and walked stiffly into her study. In spite of all of her sickness, Rachel had reached her goal. Finally, she could rest. She put on a classical record, sank into a deep chair, and cried with relief. Rachel didn't get much rest. When parts of the Silent Spring were printed in the New Yorker a few months later, it shocked the whole country. Readers sent thousands of angry letters to newspapers, to chemical companies, and to the government. As Rachel had expected, pesticide makers were furious. Men from the chemical companies and the Department of Agriculture argued with her in the newspaper magazines and on the TV and radio. Some tried to prove her facts wrong. Others said she didn't know enough about science to understand the things she was writing. One said her book is even more poisonous than the pesticides. President John F. Kennedy asked for a special report from top scientists to decide who was right. When the report came out, it agreed with Rachel. New laws were made to limit chemical pollution in the United States and to find other ways to control insect pests. Awards and offer to travel and speak flooded into Rachel. She was too sick to do very much. She worked to make her article about children and nature into a book. She never finished it, but The Sense of Wonder was published after she died. Even though she was in pain most of the time, Rachel agreed to be on television. Many thousands of people had read her book, but on TV she could tell millions more about the danger of using too many pesticides. On the same show, a man from the chemical company tried to prove she was wrong. Rachel was still a nervous speaker, but she knew her facts were true. She said man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is a war against himself. The viewers believed her. Silent Spring was published in dozens of other countries in 1963. No matter what language it was printed in, the messages were the same. We must be more careful about what we do to the earth. Around the world, new laws were made about pesticides. Rachel spent the next summer in Maine. One afternoon, she and Dorothy Freeman sat on top of the rocky cliff near Rachel's house. They listened to the sounds of the sea below them and watched the monarch butterflies heading south for the winter. As the butterflies danced along the cliff's edge, Rachel and Dorothy wondered how many would ever come back. Most would never live to return, they realized. The two friends were not sad about it. That is how life was for butterflies. Later that day, Rachel wrote a note to Dorothy to explain that those fluttering bits of life taught me this morning. She said she found a deep happiness in knowing that it is natural and not an unhappy thing that life comes to its end. A few months later, Rachel returned to Silver Spring. Her own life came to its end. She died on April 14, 1964, but the work of her books went on. Her writings about the sea showed how all life was tied together. Silent Spring showed how the future of all life depended on what we do. Over the years, Rachel Carson's love of nature and her beautiful writing have helped her to change the way the world of people looks at life of their planet. All right, guys, that is